All right, I think we're working. So I'm not really prepared to talk about all, this subject I wanted to talk about, really. And it was something to do with mentors. And thinking about it because a close friend of mine passed away the other day. And he's an older fella. He was in his 70s, so kind of an elder, you know. And he was a guitar player, musician, played in our local area, played in a lot of bands back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. And, you know, around the year 2002, 2003, he kind of stopped playing so much out. And, you know, he'd play at parties and just kind of, you know, around the house and stuff like that. And I met him on the scene, and we became really close friends. He was a rock and roller where, you know, I was in a folk band. He was kind of in a couple legendary projects around our area. The Leisure Brothers, Xanarak, rock and roll. Played with some of the really great players in our area. I don't really want to drop these names because a lot of people, you know, outside of our area don't know them, but why not, you know? So he played with like Mike Shannon, Howie Wilkes, Dave Willeen, Lester Peterson, and just a bunch of other guys, you know. And I love to, you know, hang out with him and pick guitar, hear stories about these old bands and these old musicians and what it was like doing the rock and roll back in the day, you know. And you know, we'd get together sit around a kitchen table, you know, and we're at a counter and drink beer and smoke and pick guitars and laugh and go in a circle, kind of sharing songs and stuff, and have these moments of brilliance, these jams that would, you know, never be captured again. You know, they're out there. We'd put them out into eternity, and I would woodshed a lot of songs, and he would be, you know, kind of honest about, you know, whether or not he liked something and whether or not he didn't. He's a self-professed rock and roll drunken guitar player is what he called himself. That was his archetype. One winter, he and I got together, and I helped him record a bunch of demos, and he loved it so much. He loved that process. You know, he had been in recording projects before, made some CDs or tapes back in the day, right? You know, demos of their songs, and but the multi-tracking with a computer was a completely alien thing to him because he used to track to tape, so he loved the ability to go in and change things. And then, you know, we recorded these songs. He did all this overdubs, and we mixed it to his specifications using his system, his stereo system, and he really liked that. And he had a product. He had one, maybe a couple copies of that album. That's what he called it. I call it a demo, but he called it an album, and he would play it for people to come over and give copies to people. And he wanted to take it further. He wanted to make real copies, do CD Baby and stuff, and make copies of it. But he never, you know, had the money to do that or the financing to do that because it would cost a couple $100. And he was a poor drunken guitar player, you know. You know, it was an honor to, you know, because he was a guy that encouraged my music. It was great to encourage him to record his original songs. And one of the things I'm going to do is for his family and his friends is I'm going to not going to remix the album. I'm just going to touch some things up because the mix is what he wanted. We're just going to get these songs down, put them into a video format, like a slideshow thing, and get it out onto this channel so people can appreciate his songwriting and his some of his musicality, I remember when I was recording the album, I haven't heard it in a while, that they were just great earworms of songs. And it was all him that recorded it. But, you could tell that he did the bass and guitars. I did some backing vocals, some keyboards, some percussion. And our friend Steve Richardson did some washtub bass on stuff. But you could tell that he had the whole song conceptualized in his mind, of what those songs could be with a band. They would have been awesome, and great rock and roll songs, and the sequencing that he envisioned too, the way the songs flowed. He had everything in mind. I'll tell the story about that process when I put that video up. I'll put it in the whatever it's called there underneath this. Yeah, I'd say it's probably been 5 years. He just didn't want to play much anymore. His age and weariness. But he taught me a lot as a mentor. I've had a few mentors in my life, and I have a few that are still alive, and I really would like actually to have an appreciation video about my mentors, especially the couple that are still alive. And of course there's probably more. There are probably more than a couple, so but on the guitar he taught me dynamics, he taught me touch. Have some dynamics, when you get loud, you want it to mean something, right? He taught me train songs. Like, he would play at the Gaslight, and every time a train would go by, he'd have to do a train song. Now that's a folk thing, but he was a rock and roller. But he was doing this. He would do like Locomotive Breath. He would do, Desperados, Waiting for a Train. He taught me to pace myself drinking, which taught me about that. I never learned that, and that's why I'm sober now. He taught me not to be so compartmentalized and judgmental. He showed me that the road to excess sometimes does not lead to the palace of wisdom. Or if it does lead the palace of wisdom, you might not choose to enter it, and you might just, walk away and continue down that road to excess. So maybe there's a mentor in your life. Maybe there's somebody that you're learning things from, that you respect, that you should thank them. I had the opportunity to do that with my friend Bob. I had the opportunity to, tell him when he was in the hospice and in his the last days, that I sat there and I said, man, I learned a lot from you. I always appreciated our time together, and it was always great to go over to his house. He would always greet me with a smile, and say, Nathan, how you doing? It's good to see you, and it was always good hanging out with him. Someone that encourages you, in the truest sense of the word, encourages, gives you courage, lifts you up. I mean, so important. In a personal relationship, I think, even just sitting in the same room with that somebody and having that, breathing the same air, looking eye to eye across the table, sharing music, being vulnerable with another human being, so powerful. I hope someday I can do that for somebody else, yeah, like I said, I might talk more about my mentors here, Jeff Cahill, Howie Wilkes, Michael Shannon were my three big ones that I knew personally, that were local guys doing this music thing, doing this artist thing, trying to keep things real too, like doing things that are kind of not in a commercial you know, avenue, but doing things that they really felt passionate about and they really felt were important, and they wanted to share it with the rest of the world, you know. And that's what Bob did too. Bob was really good at that. Yeah, this is just a little video I want to throw out there about my friend Bob Krogh. And you'll see this album, hopefully it's going to be done and, you know, up in his album, which is demos. They're pretty rough. They're recorded in a rough situation with a lot of whiskey, pot, beer, distractions, with not pro equipment, but it was a lot of fun. And the songs are there. And I like that DIY stuff. And that's exactly what this was. So that's going to be coming. And I think I just want to run over here quick. I got this box that he wanted me to have. And this box is full. I haven't gone through it. I just looked through it really quick. This box is full of notebooks and folders. You know, this one says originals, but there's not much in it. A lot of them were torn out, put into this folder. This is him playing some music here. I don't know if you can see that. That's him singing there. And then, yeah, Les Peterson on bass. Here he is. Here's a better picture of him. That's him there. So, and that's Dave Willeen, who's another really powerful mojo around this area. All these cats were, here, I think this is Xanarak. Look at this, is at that bar in Rutledge. That's Bob there. That's Les, and I think that's Henry, the drummer. So, they were a hot rock and roll band. I never saw them. But anyway, this video is probably going on too long, but thank God for editing. Yeah, look for that stuff coming up, and more projects to do. So I want to finish my album one of these days. Now I'm going to get Bob's out there as soon as possible, and one of these days I'm going to go through this, all these lyrics here of his, and maybe collaborate with Bob beyond the grave. You never know. Could happen. All right. Signing off. See you later.